Okay, welcome everybody. We've got a pretty full agenda and we've got actually quite a short time to fit it into. So we'll do our best and we'll try and get through
As long as it takes, haven't we?
what we can.
As the meetings are.
Right. Apologies. We have one apology, which is from David Mead. Are there any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests or other disclosable interests, Jenny?
Thank you, Lee. Just to declare an interest in respect to item 11, as I worked for a registered housing provider.
Okay. Right.
I've worked for Citizens Advice, so I've got an interest in 14.
Okay, thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 16th September. Are we all happy with those minutes and no corrections? Willing to accept all that? Okay. Chair's announcements, there are none. Public participation, none. And we've gone immediately to the revenue and capital monitoring. So that is the report in front of you covers the expenditure for 25-26 against the approved revenue capital budget. So the recommendation here is that the report be noted. So the revenue budget, the projection is actually the expenditure plus the known commitments. And the table that you see on the first page is a summary of the revenue spending for each service against the approved budget. And you can see a bit more in the Appendix A. It expands a little bit on this. So at the moment, the current projections predict an underspend of 460,000. And this is, in fact, due to basically the excellent performance we've had in investment interest, which continues year after year. And the interest rates are remaining higher for longer. And we have actually had a good return off that. In contrast to 148,000 spent last year, we have made a healthy turnaround. The business rates projected income of 2 million against 2.04 million against 1.96 last year, pretty much the same. So, and if you remember, these are all subject to historic appeal, so they can actually change, and that's the current position. On the cash management side, the cash position snapshot can be seen in the table, and it does actually, it will fluctuate, and it does fluctuate throughout the year. So we're projecting an increasingly healthy balance of 45 million at the end of the year. And the investment interests are shown in Appendix B if you want to have a look at those. The end of the year, we've got a 1.7 million pound projected return, which is in excess of the budget figure of 1.2 million. 33 million pound is actually in short-term deposit in the money market. I think last year that was 27 million pounds, so we've got more in that short-term deposit this year. The long-term investments, the CCLA Property Fund has got 9 million, the CCLA Diversified Income Fund's got 7 million. And both of these have a capital growth element on it. The recent average interest earned, I think it's in September, is 4.02%. So average since the beginning of the year, of course, is somewhere sitting above that. If you average those figures out that you've got in front of you, you'll see it's somewhat above that. It's on a decline. The money market interest rates have been declining month on month, but they're still holding up, so we still get a decent return from that. The capital is summarised in the table, which does not include any committed expenditure, and the earmarked reserves are in the S1, section 106 are tabled in Appendix C. That covers the revenue and capital monitoring for item for 25-26. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, compliments to the finance team for the usual excellent performance of our investment stuff and the nice way that we underplay that and therefore have a £500,000 net surplus in effect. It's good to see some things don't change. More substantive point, do we have any financial implications from the bin lorry that burned out in Barnard's Green a while ago? I suspect it was too recent to be in these accounts.
Andy, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take that. I don't think Ian wants to take it. Yeah, they are too early to be in these accounts. Obviously, the vehicle was insured. I'm not aware we've come to an agreement yet with the insurance company, but obviously there will be short-term higher costs to replace the vehicle, and we'll have to obviously make a decision in terms of replacing the vehicle, which I don't think we've made yet. But until then, it will be higher costs.
If I may just brief build up, do we have an order of magnitude for that and or replacement costs?
I don't, sorry, I'm sure we can get you those. Replacement will be down to, obviously, the vehicle, I think, was a 19 plate, so it was due for replacement in probably 2027 anyway. I'm yet to have a discussion with Alex around, do we bring forward that capital purchase, or more likely, do we look to get a cheap second-hand vehicle in the interim? But either way, obviously, there will be a cost there. If it's a cheap second-hand vehicle in the interim, then I would hope that the insurance would cover that. But I doubt if the insurance does new for old on refuse lorries. So if we were to bring that forward, it would be a cost now. But I suspect, although we haven't made the decision, it will be to get a relatively new spare vehicle to replace it.
No other questions on that? We can move on,
Yep, it's just for number 10.
and it's been noted. That's it. The next item is the quarterly performance report, QPR 2. So what we have on this is the WDPR is an examination, and the 4th of September had some additional covering where we were looking at meeting local housing need and deliverability of the outline planning permission. The inspector's second post-hearing letter is expected, likely that it's legally compliant and sound. It's on track for adoption probably early next year. I'm not sure we've got a particular date for that, but it's now shifted into early next year as opposed to the end of this year. On unemployment, we are down to the lowest level that we've had in quite some time, 2.3%, and we are in actual fact the lowest in Worcestershire, which is very, very good news. On the services side, the overall performance is actually performing. We've upped our game, and it's thanks to all the officers for delivering against that. We had one red at the red, amber, green traffic light system. One of the deliverables, as it were, was red last time. We've got rid of that. It's shifted to amber, and all the rest are green. So well done to everybody for actually pulling that. We're moving in the right direction. The planning validation was the one that was red, and it's now amber. So that's shifting in the right direction, as I said. And the staff sickness is green. Now, that's been something that's been trickling on for a good number of years. We've been having problems with that, with long-term sickness. And we've now had the benefit of all the interventions, bringing that into the sort of green sector. The 5-year plan appendix 2 can be seen there. Everything is on track on the 5-year plan, and good progress has been made. We've got 48 community facilities legacy grant applications have been supported out of, I think it was about 70 that were applications that we had. So 48 of those have been approved and are receiving funding. On the Levelling Up Theatre project, that is progressing, and we're right at the end of this month. We're hopefully in a position to get this final contract agreed, and that's where we're sitting at the moment. I don't think there's any other update on that. Malvertown Football Club car park, if anybody's seen that, that's been a really good piece of work done in there, and that's been finished, and we've really lifted the whole area up. On the rural fund side of things, there are 10 projects that have been approved with 166,000 allocated. That concludes the summary of the quarterly performance report. The recommendations are that the achievements and improvements in performance be noted, the strategic issues raised in section 4 be considered, and that the executive committee thanks staff for the outcome of their efforts. Have we any questions on that?
Can I just ask a general question? Is there going to be another round of the community funding? I think when it was announced a few times ago that, maybe last exec, I can't remember now, that the funding had closed, there was a comment that there might be another fund open. I wasn't sure.
Jen, do you want to pick that up?
Thank you. We've absolutely made a commitment to review a round 2, and I say that in the respect I think we need to do the work on round 1 to make sure that's up and running. I think we need to reflect on the learning from that. What were the barriers? What were the good things? And also, you know, go back and speak to communities and VCS organisations about what are the pressures they're facing. You know, are we looking at round 2 a capital, or are actually looking at revenue? And you'll see a report obviously coming forward this evening around revenue support, which is particularly important for some of our core service infrastructure organisations. So absolutely happy to commit that we will come back to it. As you can probably see from tonight's agenda, my focus has been around housing, but absolutely we'll watch this space in the new year.
Just a quick question. I noticed there's been quite a significant uptick in fly tipping in the first quarter. I think 66% was reported in the first quarter of this year. Do we know what is driving that, and whether we as a council are driving any further measures to address that uptick?
Ian, could we have it?
I can confirm there's no common theme amongst the fly tipping. There hasn't seen a particular uplift in building materials or residential. There is consistency. I think that we're still getting a lot of green waste and some residential fly tipping as well. We are supporting campaigns to inform people about their role in ensuring that their waste carrier licence exists with the contractor that they're engaging with. It is disappointing to see that uptick despite the work that has been done, but Rob and his team will continue to try and keep downward pressure on the fly tipping and also the clear up rates, which is clearly important. As soon as the investigation is done, we look to clear the site as quick as we can.
Thank you. I always think the recommendations are in the wrong order. I think we should thank staff first, particularly because 94% is a phenomenal achievement when in the current climate, other councils might be completely distracted by LGR, which obviously is something that we're having to go through that we don't want to. So my first point is a big thank you for being, you know, performing so well in current climate. I've got a question about household support funding. We're on tranche 7 now, so I'm just wondering whether all of the funding for tranche 7 has been allocated by the people that we've given it out to. Have they allocated it out to residents, or is there enough left to maybe support people through the really cold months that seem to have started already? And then just one other question after that, if that's okay.
Jen, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. So most of the funding has been allocated, as you know, to a range of different organisations, and they are managing that in a way to ensure that sort of doesn't run out, if you like, before the end of the financial year, but that they're managing it in a phased way. We have also allocated some of that funding specifically around warm spaces. So you'll be aware that a number of organisations have applied to support warm spaces over the coming months. And we've also allocated a pot to our Poverty Truth Commission, and they've been doing a piece of work to ensure that that we're using that funding to target the things that they believe matter to our residents. So we've been able to take quite because we've had a full year rather than sort of 6-month pots of money, we've been able to take a more planned approach, and we're now engaged with County Council and other partners on the forthcoming changes to the Household Support Fund, so that have been announced this year, which will be a new fund starting next year that will also begin to incorporate over time discretionary housing payments as well. So we're working across the organisation to try and make sure we've got a planned approach, and to make sure that that money gets where it's needed.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I also know that there is a change in landscape around this, so to have an update is really helpful. Thanks, Jen. You did mention something that I wanted to ask about next, which was the Poverty Truth Commission work. So I'm really pleased that you're engaging with commissioners around that piece of work on sort of what's needed over the winter months. I might have expected to see an update in here in the Appendix 2, because I do think it's a piece of work we should be really proud of. So I'm not really sure where we're up to with things. Are we expecting a report soon or an update soon, or can we have a verbal one now? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing I would reflect on is that we do, as officers, have a behind the scenes, longer, more detailed version of this, but you would then have sort of 40 odd pages if it was from across the council. So I'm more than happy to circulate that part from our directorate with you, Natalie, and other members. We have recently begun meeting with both the community commissioners and the civic and business commissioners. We're still recruiting and bringing on board civic commissioners, but we've got some really good buy-in from partners from across organisations, and we're in that sort of quite tricky phase of bringing the community commissioners and civic commissioners together, building trust. It feels like a slow process, but it's really important to get that bit right, so that actually when we're having conversations about really challenging subjects to do with people's financial well-being, we've got that trust and that understanding of one another as individuals. So we've got our third meeting of us bringing us together in early December, and in the new year we will be starting to identify areas where collectively commissioners want to focus our time. The sorts of things that have been coming up so far have been very much around, you will not be surprised to know, benefits, housing, and also, interestingly, access to culture and leisure opportunities. And so our December meeting is being hosted by Malvern Theatres, and so they are hosting us for a sort of Christmas get together, and as part of that, looking at ways in which they can adapt their offer so that it's welcoming and inclusive to all. So some really interesting range of things that the group are starting to talk about.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. That's all the questions. So thank you, everybody. We've got those recommendations. Can we have a seconder for those? Yep.
Okay, all those in favour, could you raise your cards now, please? Your hand up, Jules. Yeah, that's unanimous.
I'll bring David. Just how do you do this? I'll bring him in here. Pull the end one up to there. Next item is the UK Share Prosperity Fund and Rural England Prosperity Fund, and that, can I ask Beverly Nielsen to take that up?
Thank you very much indeed, John. Yes, very pleased to bring this to exec. It's a report a mid-term report for the period April 25 to September 25 of progress with the UK SPF Shared Prosperity Fund and the Rural England funding allocated so far this year. And as itemised, the total budget for the period is 830,000, and of the SPF funding with the quarterly spend of 325,000, 39% of the budget, and for the Rural England funding 150,000, but actually greater amount than that has been committed because of the further £100,000 which Malvern Hills allocated from reserves, 84% of which is committed. I think one of the points that Council will want to note is that there will be, government has now confirmed there will be no further UK SPF or REPF funding allocated beyond 25-26, and without any further funding, we may not be able to or likely to see significant reductions in this funding without perhaps any commitment from ourselves. There are funds which have been announced, Local Growth Fund and Pride in Place, but Worcestershire specifically doesn't qualify for Pride in Place. So we are waiting for further details on a Growth Mission Fund and whether that will apply to us, but the indications are that it's not an enormous amount. I think you'll see from the appendices the range of projects that have been committed, fantastic range of projects, great success, and many thanks to the officers involved who've done a really brilliant job, and Elspeth and Aidan in particular. You may be wondering why the numbers allocated in the appendices are different to the sums listed at the start of the report, and that is because management and admin element of the budget is not included in the projects to which funds have been allocated. So that accounts for the difference in the amounts listed. And I'd just like to pull out a few. 46 grants awarded to enterprises from the economic development grants, and that's amounted to almost £500,000. Building Brighter Futures, 10 economically inactive people have been supported, 6 are now in employment, fantastic outturn. Careers Malvern Hills, 60 people of a target of 35 receive support, employment support, and 17 are now in employment. And on the Skills Boost funding, which I think was a particularly innovative and much appreciated initiative, 156 people, given a target of 150, have been supported to participate in education, and 26 people have reported increased employability through their development and interpersonal skills funded through the programme. So I think it's been a tremendous success. It's very important that we, continue to keep on top of what alternatives may become available, and I know officers are very much on top of that. And I hope that the committee notes the report, this mid-term report. Thank you.
Do we have any questions on that? Natalie?
Yeah, no, just an observation picking up on what Beverly said really about the anticipated impact of the withdrawal of the government funding. Obviously, we've got things like the town centre funds and the town centre plans, the arts and cultural programme, and as Beverly mentioned, the Careers Malvern Hill scheme, just to mention a few. So it's heartening to hear that officers are looking at alternatives, because I wouldn't want our residents to feel left behind just because they live in a rural community, because it does seem that government funding is kind of skewed away from the needs of our communities in rural areas. So I'll keep a close watching brief on that one, if I may. Thanks.
It does, just to take up the points that Councillor McVeigh, Natalie makes, there does appear to be a much greater dependence on indices of multiple deprivation in the funding that's being allocated, that we are seeing being allocated. And the one fund that we feel, might be, is a national fund and may be relevant to us, the Growth Mission Fund. There's capital spending worth 240 million over 4 years, so 60 million a year, and it's a competitive fund. So it's not a huge fund, but that is, as far as we're aware at the moment, the only fund that may be relevant to us. I think I've got that correct, Ian, unless you'd like to add a word or two. Thank you.
Yeah, it's one in theory that we'd qualify for, but I think we need to manage our expectations as to whether we would actually be a priority within it, given our relatively positive levels of multiple deprivation in a national sense.
Just picking up on that, it's really important that they broaden their kind of formula, if you like, because rural deprivation is felt very harshly, and I'm not sure that it's regarded as such when they're looking at indices of multiple deprivation. I've just spent 5 days in one of the most deprived areas of the country, up in Kirby, Knowsley, Kirby, and they might attract funding, but obviously they've got different issues to the ones that we're facing. But we've still got communities that need a lot of support, and it's hidden often. So I just hope that they include rural deprivation in the formula when they're looking at indices of multiple deprivation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have we got any other questions on that?
That's just for noting. It's just
No.
for noting.
Yeah. So this item is for noting, for committee to note. Move on to item 9, which is item 9, renewing our strategic approach to housing. Jenny.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce this report, which effectively sets out our renewed strategic approach to housing across Malvern District. We all know that housing pressures facing us in our district have grown, as they've nationally. Rising homelessness duties, higher use of temporary accommodation, compounded by the shortage of affordable homes that we're able to deliver through our pipeline. And at the same time, private rented sector in the Malvern District is comparatively small. We have older stock and in some cases in poor condition, which does mean families have fewer options, and our teams are working with increasingly complex cases. So this report brings those issues together, outlines how we intend to respond in a more joined up and proactive way, and focuses really on four core areas. First, the reshaping and strengthening of our housing teams so that we have the right capacity, skills, and are able to respond to the demand, support residents earlier, and reduce the pressure on temporary accommodation. Second, removing barriers to affordable housing delivery by working more closely with planning, developers and registered providers, and tackling issues such as the designated protected area, which limits progress. And there's a obviously subsequent report that Councillor Harrison will be bringing forward this evening. Bringing more empty homes back into use through our new empty home strategies, through dedicated officer resource, and again more on that in a later report. And finally, improving the supply and quality of our temporary accommodation, reducing reliance on bed and breakfast to work towards our council plan ambition of zero use, and increasing access to more suitable and stable options for families particularly. So together, what we hope is these actions set out the direction for how we will help prevent homelessness, increase availability of good quality housing, and support our communities across the district. And effectively today asking Exec Committee to note the changing context, endorse the renewed strategic approach, and consider the two related decisions in accompanying reports later this evening. I'm happy to take any questions, and I know Jen and Laura are behind me at the back of the room to assist.
Mark.
Thanks for that. I certainly welcome this report, and there's certainly a lot to welcome within it in terms of action, particularly given the pressures the housing team are under. I think it was just one question, I suppose, in relation to barriers to affordable housing. I think I, like many others, are quite frustrated by the lack of availability of affordable housing to meet local need across the district. And still, I think there's an element of tokenism in terms of developments coming forward. I suppose my question to the team is, I notice that you are looking to identify opportunities to remove barriers to delivery of affordable housing. How is that going to be approached specifically, particularly with regards to the discussions with developers. Just really kind of want to know a little bit around the kind of tactics that you're proposing to use there, because I think there's a difference between having those conversations and actually then seeing plans submitted in terms of an uptick of affordable housing across the district.
Yeah, I'll kick off, and then Laura, if you've got anything to add, please do. So, I think it's a good question because it's a complex problem, and I think one of the things that we recognise is that some of the problem is in our influence and some of it's not in our influence. So I think the first thing that we've started to do is to have conversations with registered providers and developers. We held a really successful roundtable with registered providers and Homes England to start to talk about what is stopping you, what's stopping you taking on Section 106 units, for example, what's preventing you from developing your own projects yourself as well. A big issue there is around the funding that's available for RPs, and that's obviously that's largely out of our influence because they're funded largely through Homes England and through their own income and from investments. But certainly the new Homes England affordable housing programme that was launched this month, I think will see a significant change to delivery. There's also the challenge that they are seeing increasing amounts of legislation that is creating other pressures on housing associations to bring their existing stock up to different standards, and so they're having to invest a lot more of their capital in existing stock. So where we're trying to work with registered providers and developers is on where are those levers that we've got available to us. So we are currently out to tender for some specialist capacity to bring into the team. And that's with a view to bringing in somebody or some people with commercial and residential development experience and knowledge that can talk the language of registered providers and can talk the language of developers, and to have conversations about what sort of quite candid conversations about what's stopping you from delivering this, and where are the things where we could do things more creatively, looking at what other areas have done. So you may be aware of the Devon inquiry into affordable housing, where they held a kind of commission model, if you like, that started to look at some of those solutions, and to try and sort of pull together some of those different parties to try and start speaking the same language about what we can do. Through that work we've done so far, we've been able to identify that the designated protected area is one of the main barriers that we've got the ability to influence, and we'll talk about that shortly when that paper comes forward. But we've also got other abilities working with our planning colleagues to ensure that earlier conversations are taking place between developers and registered providers earlier on in the planning process, so that we're addressing some of those barriers earlier on, and we're not getting to a point where perhaps a development has had planning permission but then unable to secure a registered provider, and then we risk losing valuable affordable housing at that stage. So there are lots of different levers we could pull, and our current approach is to bring some specialist knowledge in to help us to work through those barriers and identify potential solutions. Laura, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I was just going to add that we have also been engaging with MHCLG around the barriers that we're experiencing. Other areas are obviously experiencing those barriers as well, but we do have a forum and a mechanism whereby we are feeding up the issues that we're having, and also receiving any advice or assistance around that. We also have the county-wide housing strategy, and there are 2 delivery groups that are working on the implementation of that strategy, but there is one of the delivery groups specifically around boosting affordable housing and housing growth. So there's that mechanism as well that we're tapping into.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Natalie.
Yeah, thanks. I do welcome this report. I know it's been a long time in the pipeline, so well done for bringing it forward. I appreciate you might need to come back to me on this. And Laura, I know that you did email me to ask if I'd got any questions, and I said I hadn't read it at the time, and I still hadn't until quite late yesterday. So I'm sorry about this. But with 1,208 households are on the waiting list at the moment, I think I've read. But I wonder how many individuals that represents, because a household can vary, can't it, from one to a lot more than one. So I'm just wondering how it translates into actual people, and what the kind of age of those people are. And then also the number of people in Q2 on the waiting list in the highest priority banding is quite high, and it's gone up quite a lot. And I just wondered how, it's 141, but how does that compare to the same quarter 12 months ago? Sorry, I'm not expecting you to have that information off the top of your head, but if you want to have a sort of a think and say you'll come back to me, that's fine. Then I've got just a couple more questions on different points. Sorry.
Jenny, you want to come in?
I was just going to add, I think if it's okay for Laura to come back, because I'd be, equally interested in seeing those, but I think given time constraints this evening and putting Laura on the spot, that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. So the other point I wanted to raise is around best practice, and it's good that you're looking at, models of best practice from other places. I've already mentioned where I was last week. And what they've started to do is when a landlord genuinely wants to sell a property because they want to sell it, and not for any other reason, they've stepped in and bought properties to prevent families from being made homeless. So I don't know whether that's anything that we've looked at, or whether we've got the resources to even consider something like that. But they have managed to have some really successful interventions that way. So yeah, there's that question. And then one around hotels and the use of hotels and B&Bs, which we all know are completely inappropriate, especially if it's a family being housed there. Not only are they often moved, which is what you've said in the report, but the cooking facilities are non-existent. So that's a big problem. So enhancing the supply of privately owned properties does seem a better way forward. We just wanted to know what kind of work you're doing around that. I know you've been doing that for a long time as well. So how have those conversations been going? Have we got more private landlords on board with it? And yeah, how do people know about our emergency food offers that might be living in temporary accommodation? Sorry, a few questions there.
Jen, can you come back on any of that?
I'll answer broadly and then invite officers if I may, just conscious of time. On your first suggestion, I'd say no, that's not something that we've looked at the moment. Obviously, our focus has been about looking at what we need to do to deliver within the district and incorporating best practice. So we'll certainly go away and discuss that. I'm just mindful of the current climate we're in with local government reorganisation and what we've got within our gift to get going and make an impact now. But I think that's something we can certainly look at. I think on the second question about the use of temporary accommodation and moving away against bed and breakfast, you'll know that I made it a commitment or an ambition, would I say, in the council plan that we stop using B&B for exactly the reasons that Councillor McVeigh has said. I think as we go on to discuss our empty home strategy and some of our intention around how we might potentially work with property owners on RPs to repurpose some of those properties for temporary accommodation, I'd certainly be in favour of looking at how we create that sort of stable, self-isolated, probably self-contained rather, approach to enabling families to have stability during a time where obviously they wouldn't be getting it for sure in bed and breakfast. So I think that hopefully answers your questions broadly. I don't know whether officers want to add any details I've missed, maybe on the food parcel and support.
Not necessarily on the food pass. I think probably Jen might be best to answer that one. But we've looked at a range of different ways to increase temporary accommodation, and we really do feel that probably the best way is to work creatively with housing providers that are already set up to manage properties, and they've got the land, the properties. So we've looked at a range of different options, but it's not something that we've necessarily considered taking on as a council at this moment in time.
Yeah, and I'm happy just to pick up the food parcel items. So we do have really good connections between the housing officers and the outreach officers that are supporting people that are in temporary accommodation, and then with our welfare assistance scheme and partners such as citizens' advice, but also our food bank offers as well. So we've got increasingly positive working relationships where those housing officers that are supporting people in temporary accommodation are aware of what's out there and able to connect them in. When they're working with individuals in temporary accommodation, they are thinking not just about their housing, but about all of those other needs as well. And as you say, Councillor McVeigh, the one of the challenges of not having cooking facilities is what food is available for those individuals. And certainly I know of situations where we've worked with the food bank to ensure that the food that's made available in temporary accommodation doesn't necessarily have to be cooked, but is sort of manageable as far as possible within the challenging circumstances that they're living within. But yeah, really good relationships between all of those people that are supporting them.
Okay, that covers, no other questions. That covers that item. The committee is asked to note the report, which we do. If we move on to the next item, I would like to bring David, I'd like to bring the very last item up to the next item, if that's okay with you. The very item 15. Now, what, so that you, it's okay, and then we can run through your 3 items from there.
No problems. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is.
Hang on a minute, David.
Councillor McVeigh would like to know why the leaders allowed that. Councillor Harrison hasn't been feeling too well, and he asked the leader to use his discretion as chair to move it forward in case he needs to leave.
Okay, sorry to...
Go ahead, David.
Sorry about that. Item 15, what have you. The recommendations, I'm not going to go through the report. Everybody's had the opportunity to read through the report. Recommendations are, as in item 2 on this, basically to approve an allocation of £100,000 from the priorities earmarked reserve to a Malvern Hills Neighbourhood Planning Fund. And then the proposals delegated to the Director of Planning Infrastructure and the portfolio holder, which happens to be me. £100,000, this was discussed at great detail. I didn't think it was enough. I was convinced that it was enough. I'm now quite happy with that. Our contact officer, Andy Ford, Principal Planning Officer, is here if anybody has any questions.
Any questions on that item? No. Did we have Jeremy?
Just to say, I'm happy to second this. I think that as we go to LGR, I think any strength we can give to our town and parish councils to complete strong local plans that that provide evidence for them to remain is a good thing. So I'm absolutely happy to second this.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. So,
and of course, Mr. Chairman and members, some people have already started their neighbourhood plans and will be cut off and not be able to finish them. So this is pretty good. Andy, thank you very much for coming, turning up. Sorry you've got no questions. You're probably quite pleased about that. But thank you. I'll leave that I've proposed it and Jeremy Owenson, Councillor Owenson, has seconded it.
Okay, so all those in favour, could you raise your cards now, please? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
thank you. Can we go on to the next item? Is Malvern Hills Empty Homes Strategy, David?
That's mine, leader. Yeah, sorry, back with me, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, following the conversation we've just had on the renewed strategic approach to housing, this next report focuses on one of the most practical and immediate ways we can potentially increase the availability of homes in the district via this new strategy from 2025 to 2030. The report went to overview and scrutiny last week and was received well. Broadly, I'm sure you've all read the report, but obviously empty homes have been a discussion of many forums of this council for a while and seen as fairly significant issue in Malvern Hills. As you see from the report, we've currently got 669 properties empty for more than 6 months and over 1,200 households on the housing register, as we've mentioned. So bringing even a proportion of these homes back into use can make a real difference to supply to the local neighbourhoods that they affect and to reducing homelessness. So the strategy sets out a clear plan for how we'll identify, target and tackle some of those empty homes, and sets out really 4 simple priorities: getting the data right, raising awareness, providing advice and support, and through a financial incentive scheme, and using enforcement where it's needed, but only after supportive options have been explored. Exec are being asked to approve a £75,000 incentive budget, which will come from our existing housing reserves, really just to help owners carry out essential works, things like tackling damp, rewiring, etc., so that they can sell, let, or move on back into the property. Happy to take any questions, and again, I know Jen and Laura are here to support that too.
I think Mark was first there.
Thanks for that. Again, totally welcome this. It's a travesty. Some homes in Malvern have been empty. In fact, I know a couple that over a decade or so. So I think any initiative is welcome. I suppose my question is around the £75,000 budget. You know, knowing some of the empty properties that can be subsumed very quickly, you know, just in wiring. Is there going to be any kind of ceiling in terms of the maximum amount of that limited pot for each homeowner? Because in theory, it could easily be subsumed in just providing a grant to one home.
Yeah, so we are in the process of developing the incentive scheme, and we've been looking at best practice from other local authorities to make sure that we get that right. But yes, we are aware that it's not a finite budget, and we want to be able to bring as many empty homes back into use as possible. So there will be indicative levels of funding compared to the level of intervention that's needed. I haven't explained that very well, but yes, there will be an indication of what level of grant they would receive for different types of works, whether it be rewiring or boiler installation. And there's also other budgets potentially we can tap into in terms of energy efficiency grants and things like that.
Yes, I was going to raise a question about the budget actually, because it doesn't seem a big budget for doing all this. But my more general question was, and it's for the team really, have you come across places where people who are the owners are actually incredibly wealthy and just can't be bothered to do it? And I'm assuming that we wouldn't give the money out to people who just can't be bothered. They might be sitting on them in the hope that the prices are going to go up or something like that. I mean, we had one I know in Westmoreland, Natalie, your ward now, but where it was, it's not. Yeah, it's not empty now. But I mean, that was empty for years, and you know, it was actually a big property, and you know, so I just wondered if you've got cases of that where you've come across people who just can't be bothered, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the reasons for homes being empty are wide-ranging. Some are quite simple to sort out, some are very, very complex. Yes, as part of the grant incentive scheme, that is specifically targeted at owners who don't have the financial means to be able to take on the renovations and repairs. So absolutely, the financial situation of the owner would be looked into. And I think, you know, we have invested, haven't we, in a dedicated resource, an empty homes officer to support this work, and their job is very much about finding the story out behind every empty home in Malvern, and understanding the owner's position as well, and so, like Jenny said earlier, really about that supportive stance initially. And because it's a lot easier to bring empty homes back into use if you've got the owner on board, and we're able to provide a financial incentive. So yeah, I can assure you that we will be because we now have a dedicated resource, we will know the story behind every empty home and support where absolutely necessary.
Okay, Natalie.
Thank you. Yeah, my colleagues have just picked up a couple of the questions I was going to ask. But I think I read in the report that 38 properties had been visited so far and 10 owners had been met with, and that also others had been written to. I'm wondering how many have been written to, what's the response rate? If we've got that. Sorry, it's all numbers from me tonight. I don't often ask about numbers. So that's one question. Then it says that as many homes as possible will be brought back into use. I wondered what anticipated, percentage rate you're hoping for with that one. And then obviously enforcement action, if it comes to that, could be quite expensive. So I'm hoping that, I'm sure you will do everything we can to avoid us getting to that point. But, I wonder how much it does cost. Have we looked at how much other councils have had to pay in terms of enforcement action, if that is the route that's taken? Thank you.
Yeah, I will have to come back to you on the numbers. The officer only started in post in September, so it's pretty early days. But yeah, very active in terms of surveying owners, asking for information, visiting, making other inquiries through things like council tax and other sources of data. So yes, we will be providing a quarterly report on all of our performance statistics in that area. So yeah, that will definitely be available in due course. In terms of as many homes as possible, again, having this dedicated resource will help us to understand the nature and scale of empty homes and the complexity of some of them, of bringing them back into use. So I think, once we've had this post in position for a while and we know the scale and scope of all of the empty homes, I think, potentially then we can we'll have a better picture of which homes are easier to bring and possible to bring back into use, as opposed to those that have been long-term empty and extremely complex. So I think that information will be forthcoming as we progress with this project and with this officer in place. The third query around enforcement action, yeah, I mean, we've made it clear in our approach that we would need to do a full review as to whether that is necessary, and the implications for the council in terms of taking that enforcement action. When you're talking compulsory purchase orders and things like that, it's an undertaking. So a full review would be done by senior officers if we were going to go down that route. Jen, I think you were going to jump.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I agree exactly as Laura says. It sort of depends, the cost of enforcement depends on the property itself. And I think what we've reflected since Dave has been in post just for a couple of months is that the scale is quite different to the kinds of properties that we're seeing across the border in Wychavon, where we've had someone in post for a bit longer. So we are seeing larger, more complex properties in Malvern empty, and therefore obviously enforcement would potentially be more expensive. One of the things, however, we have reviewed in the last, since Dave came into post, is the enforcement powers that those officers have available to them, and building relationships, for example, with our community safety team, who have different kinds of powers that can be used that might not necessarily be specific housing powers to take enforcement, but can impact on issues, for example, where it's having a negative impact on the community, and enforcement powers can be used from that kind of angle, if you like. So we're trying to think creatively about which enforcement powers we can use, so that we've got both the carrot and the stick, recognising that some of the specific empty homes enforcement powers are expensive, time-consuming, onerous, and not often used by local authorities for those reasons.
Okay. Right, we have a proposer. Is there any other question? Okay. We have a proposer. We've got a seconder for that. Jeremy, thank you.
All those in favour, could you raise your cards now, please? That's unanimous.
Thank you, Misha. The next item is David, item 11. removing barriers to developing new affordable housing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This has been given to me to bring forward tonight because Jenny here has a technical interest, being a affordable housing providers member of staff. Anyway, the report seeks approval for a pragmatic and consistent solution to one barrier to the delivery of affordable housing in Malvern Hills and elsewhere. The designated protection area was designed 16 years ago to make sure that shared ownership properties are not lost to the open market in areas where they may not be easily replaced. It does this by placing restrictive leases on shared ownership properties in the area covered, which is in fact the whole of the Malvern Hills district apart from Malvern Town Centre itself. Today, the DPA lease restrictions, although intended to have a positive effect, are outdated and unattractive to both residents and housing associations for various reasons set out in the paper. As a result, it is becoming more common that developers are unable to secure willing housing associations to take on affordable housing secured through Section 106, and quite a lot of us as district councillors have noted this in our area already. Local authorities are able to waiver the restrictions, but we currently have no agreed approach to do this in a consistent way. The result is stalled delivery of housing and an increase in number of units being converted to discount market sales rather than social rent and shared ownership. To overcome this, the Executive Committee is asked to recommend to the Council the recommendations set out in paragraph 2. That's 2.1, items 1 to 4. Officers Laura and Jen are both here to answer any questions that you may have.
Jules.
Yeah, sorry, me again. I'm losing my voice as well. I'm supportive of this, but I've got a question. I remember doing my master's thesis on the right to buy, which, as we know, turned out to be a disaster in terms of social housing and taking housing out of the social market. And I'm just a little bit worried that this might happen in a small way. No, it probably won't be a big way, but it could be a small way. And could you give me some confidence that that won't happen, please?
Yeah, so I think what we try to do with this pragmatic proposal is balance that very small risk, because currently it's a very small number of properties do staircase up to 100% in shared ownership, and with what is happening, which is we're losing whole Section 106 allocations of both shared ownership and social rent. So it's that kind of it's a balance of which we'd prefer to lose, if you like, and so what we've tried to do is acknowledge that the protection is there in order not to lose something, but we might actually have to risk losing that very small number in order to protect the larger delivery of social rent and shared ownership. So whilst I can't guarantee that there won't be loss, it will be minimal. The DPA doesn't, so these restrictions don't apply in Malvern Town or indeed Worcester or Evesham or other larger settlements. So that risk is always there with shared ownership in areas that are not covered by the DPA. So it's an existing risk anyway. And lastly, what we've aimed to do is, and you'll see in the paper, we've built in a 2-year review, so that actually within 2 years, if we are seeing that starting to have a negative impact, we're able to take a very different approach and to review where we are. And what I would say is, given the delivery rate, in 2 years that won't have had a significant impact. It may be sort of 1 or 2 units, but if we are seeing that that's having a negative impact, we can review that. So that's our proposal, is to put that mitigation in place.
Natalie.
Yeah, thanks. I did find the report quite hard to read because there's lots of letters and abbreviations and things, and it did jump on my head up a little bit. But thanks for the detail anyway. I do share the views that Jules articulated, especially in some of our rural communities. And I was a bit surprised to read there isn't already a standardised approach to dealing with the issue. So it's just a really quick question, hopefully, in that are the other South Worcestershire authorities going down the same route as us in terms of sort of bringing this to council and the same decision making process? Because I didn't read it in the papers, so just wanted to know.
Yes, so Wychavon, it's being considered next week by executive executive board. Sorry, at Wychavon next week. Worcester, this is not an issue for, so don't need to make a decision about this.
Okay, we have a proposer. Do we have a seconder for that? Jeremy, thank you very much.
All those in favour, could you raise your cards now, please? That's clearly carried, Chair.
So this is a report which you're being asked to note, which reports on the progress towards Destination Zero. The next item after this is the review of the Destination Zero going forward. So this is basically where we're up to in fiscal 24-25. One of the things that was interesting coming out of this was that the baseline keeps shifting. So when we are successful in getting grants for Malvern Theatres, as an example, the extension of that footprint obviously increases our CO2 output. And I'm sure none of us will want to turn down the opportunity to get the better theatre, but we need to understand that we might need to do some re-benchmarking going forward. And another good example of that is the introduction of the food waste. So we are having to buy extra premises, we're having to buy extra vans to collect collect the food waste, which has an overall benefit to the district. But as far as the MHDC's CO2 output is concerned, we get the increase in terms of the vans, we get the increase in the footprint, even although we're putting in all the good technology into the vans and to the footprints. But the saving will reflect on Worcestershire County Councils because it's those that are going to do the reprocessing of the food waste. So we will, going forward, just to try and make sure that we are following the spirit of getting to net zero rather than, trying to overachieve. But the spirit of net zero, I think, is really reflected in the report in chart 3, which shows the Malvern Hills district-wide emissions. So this is chart 3 on page 11 in the report, which says we are, as a district, still continuing down to hit net zero as a full district by 2050, which is in line with UK government plans. And I think that's a great chart to be looking at. It's a shame we took the benchmark in 2005, I think it was, because we had a sharp rise in 2006. But the decline has been pretty consistent over years, and I think that's something that the British public and the people of Worcestershire should be very proud of. That as a nation we are successfully, significantly reducing our carbon footprint, and in my opinion, leading the world on getting to net zero. So I'm proud to say that Malvern Hills District Council is doing its small part as an authority. Proud that our district residents are also doing the same, and proud of Britain at the same time. Happy to take any questions.
Do we have anybody? Mark.
Yeah, so I certainly welcome this report, and certainly thanks to Matt and the team for all the hard work in getting delivery on the reductions in emissions. I think there's obviously still more to be done, particularly with regards to our own estate. Obviously, the more we reduce the emissions, the remaining emissions become increasingly challenging and much more difficult to do, because obviously we focus on the kind of low hanging fruit. I think particularly stark the figures for example, the Malvern Theatres contribute 26%, I think, of the Malvern Hills owned estate. Obviously, that's been refurbished at the moment. I do think personally it was a bit of a missed opportunity that we couldn't do more to reduce the theatre's emissions as a result of refurbishment. I do think, however, there is more that we can do, and I know we discussed this at the Environmental Policy Group, for example. One of the, I say, easier things perhaps is for example, the renewable electricity and green gas energy tariff. If we can persuade the theatres to go onto an electricity and green gas energy tariff, that would significantly reduce the emissions of the estate. So I wonder if there's more we can do, for example, on that front.
Okay, thank Jeremy. Do you want to come back?
Happy to coming back, and I mean the theatres is a good example where you know, we are taking initiatives with the extension to make it as green as possible. So built into the cost of building the extension to the theatre is to put in good quality heat pumps, etc. We are looking at solar panels and so on and so forth. We've got heat pumps going into most of our buildings, and we are still trying to get government funding to do more things with heat pumps and reduce the impact on things like the Malvern Splash. I will say I'm just a little bit nervous of the green energy mantra, because I think as a nation, and it's reflected in our overall numbers, we are switching to renewable energy. I'm always wary of asking our residents to pay more to virtue signal rather than to spend their money on something that's actually going to have a benefit, like solar panels and heat pumps.
Do you have any other comments, questions? Okay, that's for Notting Committee notes. We have Destination Zero review. That's German again.
Yep, so this has been a lot of work in reviewing this. So the Destination Zero was brought in after the council voted in 2019, and it was a 5-year plan. So this has been a lot of work in updating and reviewing and renewing, and there's been a lot of input, particularly from the Environmental Policy Panel, around making sure that the plan is up to date and looking good for the next 5 years. I think one of the key things here, you know, it's one of those classics, why are we putting in a 5-year plan when local government review says we could be gone within 2 to 3 years? And again, this is about a legacy. So the reason why I was keen to do this was to leave something for the future government, the future local council, to effectively say, well, here is the residents' view of how we should take this forward. We can continue that and hopefully put some good practice into the next single unitary authority going forward. So yeah, I'm very pleased to recommend this, the adoption of this revised plan to council, and happy to take any questions.
Natalie.
Yeah, thank you. So the first point is in the heading Climate Resilient Homes, Businesses and Communities. Paragraph 5.7 states that the number of actions has been slimmed down so as to ensure deliverability. What is meant by that, please? And can you give some examples of which actions have been taken out? My second point, one of the things we're talking about in this report is improving resilience and adaptation to climate change, but quite astonishingly, I haven't seen a mention in the reports of one of the biggest climate-related existential threats we're facing, which is flooding. You only have to look around us at the moment to know. Apart from the fact that we know about it and there are challenges and that they're likely to increase. So what is happening in and around towns like Tenbury? I thought that a task and finish group had been set up, but I've heard nothing since that, so I don't know if it's happening when, you know, people are worried about their homes, their businesses, and don't really know whether there's a solution in sight. So what's going on around that, please?
David.
I can only give you the answer to the task and finish group. That has been set up and been running since it was first discussed. It's chaired by Councillor Wilmot at the back and what have you, and doing very well. We are having a lot of difficulty in getting senior officers from other organisations, from the County Council, the Environment Agency, lots of them to come to discuss it and what have you. But it is progressing and we are, I believe, doing quite well with it. although I'm not technically on the committee.
Just in terms of climate resilient homes and businesses, etc. I mean, one of the challenges that we have around housing, and I'm sure Councillor Harrison will back me up on this one, is that if you put more and more requirements onto builders, particularly on social welfare homes, etc., social housing, the cost of building those homes becomes proportionally so high that people stop building them. With the climate resilient homes, I mentioned about the decarbonisation of the grid. I have got no doubt that by 2050, 99% of our electricity will be provided through environmentally sound electricity generation going forward. So the question is, we have a requirement in our new homes to say you do need to, where possible, look at supplying some of the energy within the home through internal means, through solar panels or heat pumps or similar. If you push that too high, when you know that the grid is decarbonising over the next 20 years, you're effectively putting a very high hurdle to homes and building in redundant technology. So what we're trying to do is get the balance between ensuring that there is the right level of green energy into the new homes that we're building, but recognising that the government and the national grid are going to fill that gap going forward. And as can be seen on the last item, where we are reducing Britain's CO2 to net zero by 2050, we're still doing very well on that line. So it's a question of getting the balance between how do we do enough, how do we support what the country's doing, but still make our properties affordable locally.
Yeah, just to come back on that, in my view, developers' quoting viability is just a spurious argument. Perhaps you can come back to me on some of the specifics that have been taken out. Thank you.
Okay. David, you want to come back?
Yeah, this is a very tricky subject, as you all know, and it goes back really to planning, which I'm the portfolio holder for. Unfortunately, when a planning application is decided, we don't always get all the information. It's normally there, but we don't read it all. We try, but we don't get it all. There is a specific planning application that was approved on the 6th of December 2023 for 40 houses, 40% affordable. They're built in a floodplain. They've got ordinary air vents, which are below the flood line, so will flood. And they were very close to flooding this last week. And what have you. The 40 houses are all run on gas, and there's no solar panels on them. And this has got to stop. We've got to be more proactive, and we've got to sort it out. And it is in my area, and I can only apologise, but I was under the knife when it was discussed.
I think Matt Barker wants to comment on the changes that have been made.
Yeah, thank you. Just to help on the specific changes, I think a good example is looking at the existing actions under the priority 3 of the current plan around energy efficient homes. We've got 4 actions in there that essentially are saying the same sort of thing about increasing the take-up of energy efficiency schemes, energy audits, working with housing providers, domestic solar PV bulk buying, support for homes that aren't on the gas grid. So all those things are essentially support for the households in energy efficiency. And what we've done in the new version of the plan is to basically tidy that up into one more succinct action, which is clear and from a practical point of view also helps with the reporting and feedback on progress. So hopefully that helps. Just on the flooding aspect, as has been mentioned, we do have an adaptation plan that's in development that will more than likely, and I want to preempt it, have specific actions around flood risk in certain areas of the district. So that'll be brought before members in due course too. Thank you.
Jules.
Yes, on that, thanks, Matt. In other parts of the country, and certainly in Dorset, where I spend a lot of time, there is a lot of natural flood prevention going on. You know, use of making scrapes and beavers and all the things you'll know about. Is there anything like that happening in Worcestershire? Lord Chief Exec's got an answer.
As I understand it, the EA are working on just that for part of the Tenbury solution. So upstream on the river team, they're looking at natural flood management techniques.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no more questions or comments. We have a proposal. We've got a seconder for that. Yep.
So all those in favour, could you raise your cards now, please? That's unanimous.
Thank you, Misha. We come on to the last item in executive, which is welfare support. And Jenny?
That's with me, Chair. Thank you. And I'm conscious I'm standing in the way of full council starting, so I'll kind of be brief as I can. However, it is an important report and one that I'm quite glad to end this evening on. It focuses on the wider welfare support that underpins our prevention work and helps keep residents stable, secure and financially resilient. You'll see the paper seeks approval for a new 5-year grant agreement with South Worcestershire Citizens Advice. Their current 3-year agreement is due to end in March 26, and their service is a key part of our local safety net, providing essential advice on money, debts, benefits, housing and much wider wellbeing issues. They do also deliver our local welfare assistance scheme and play a central role in our resettlement, poverty prevention and community wellbeing work. And some members here will recall we at the recent Health and Community PDP had a great presentation from the Citizens Advice about their work, which was well received and celebrated. And one of the questions that I asked them was what would make a real difference to support their ambitions to reach more people across the district. And their answer was around the security and longevity of funding arrangements. And we do believe by offering this will ensure that we strengthen their reach and their ambitions, and that again on that legacy point that Councillor Owenson mentioned, that we leave them in as a strong position as possible as we move towards LGR. So those who are unfortunate not to see that presentation, I'm sure the report sets out some of the significant impact they've had, and the work is, may I remind, strongly aligned with our connected community strategy and our broader health and wellbeing priorities. So the recommendation today is simply to approve the 5-year grant agreement from community service budgets and reserves, and to give delegated responsibility to finalise those arrangements. And finally, I just hope members can support this approach, and I'm sure we'll welcome any comments and questions.
Natalie?
Yeah, there's no doubt really that South Worcestershire Citizens Advice are a trusted partner and they deliver really positive, tangible results for our residents. They do a fantastic job, as you'll have read in the report, and I was there to hear the report from Annie, and it is extremely impressive. So it's an absolute 100% yes from me, and I would be happy to second if you're looking for a seconder. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No other comments on that? So we'll go straight to the vote.
All those in favour? All those abstaining? That's clearly carried, Chair.
Thank you, everybody. That's the end of executive. I think we've got